Welcome back everyone. I finally got the Xbox Series X in the house and we're going to go ahead and do a full comparison for the most part between the Series X and the Xbox One X. Now, I did do an initial little comparison earlier on. It was a quick comparison and I'll be honest, a lot of my assumptions are pretty much true. And what I can tell you is if I can just sum up this video, I would not go from an Xbox One X to a Series X right now unless you have all the money in the world. If you have all the money in the world, then by all means go for it. But from what I'm seeing, a lot of the game titles, I think for the next year or two, are probably going to be released for both consoles. I don't see any time soon where the Series X is going to be the main console where people are going to update the games only for those ones and not release them for the Xbox One X series. I don't feel like that. I feel like both are going to be supported for at least another 2-3 years. So if that's the case, if you feel like you're going to be missing out on anything, I wouldn't really say so. Now, if you're trying to play the most up-to-date and crazy graphical games in the world, then obviously by all means get the Series X, but I think the One X is still really, really good for the most part. Now, pricing-wise, the Series X cost me about $499 to pick up, and that's kind of a lot of money. I mean, the Series S is a little bit cheaper, but with the X, you're getting a lot more for your money, I would say. And it's not like the Series S is the same thing, but just cheaper. It's not the case. It's not like the PS5 and PS5 digital. This is totally more powerful than the Series S as well. And the Xbox One X, you can pick up in a lot of places in the used market for about $300. So not an insanely big difference, but for sure when it comes down to it, it's a couple $100, and the One X is only going to be cheaper. With the Series X for now, I think is only going to be more expensive since less and less people are, getting their hands on it compared to the One X right now. So I think within a year from now, everybody's going to be able to pick it up everywhere, but it's still kind of like a commodity as of this point. So if I find any on Amazon, I'll link them down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, looking on the outside, I will tell you, there's some pros and cons for both designs. Having the Series X right now, it's really not as big as I thought. I thought it was going to be much bigger. It's really not the case. It's actually pretty good, but on the outside of the Xbox One X, you had 2 HDMI ports on the back, you had 2 USB ports, and an Ethernet port, and you also had a USB port on the front. And I actually liked that design. It wasn't an ugly design by any means. It was pretty standard to what we saw with even the original Xbox One and the One S. And I was a huge fan of the way it looked, but the way it felt in the hand, which isn't really that important because you're going to set it away and pretty much be done, it just didn't feel that premium in my opinion. I feel like Microsoft kind of dropped the ball in terms of the build quality of it. It just felt extremely plasticky. And with the Xbox Series X, it's kind of in the same ballpark if I'm being completely honest. On the back of that console, you have one HDMI port, you have the memory card expansion port, you have 2 USB ports, and then you have that 1 USB port on the front. And I'm a fan of it. I think it's definitely a step up from the One X. But I've had consoles back in the day that felt more premium than this one, which is very weird. I feel like, even the original PS4 felt extremely premium. And for this one, I don't know, I haven't held the PS5. I don't know anybody who has one. I would have tested it. Sony didn't send one out to me. But I think in terms of the outside build quality, the Series X is probably better than this One X. But they still feel kind of the same if I'm being honest. But there's a really good heft to the Series X, which is something I really do like. So when it comes down to that, the outside, I'll probably give it to the Series X. But the One I think is still pretty good enough for the most part, especially for the fact that you're going to set it away and pretty much never touch it ever again. So I think that's also something that's very, very important to hit on. Now, booting both on, pretty much the same exact experience so far. And I will have a separate video on my second channel basically breaking down a UI walkthrough and, basically telling you exactly what's what and kind of an introduction to it. And maybe I'll even put that in this video. And I've been using the One X and the One S for a long time, and I'm very familiar how that software is, and it's almost the exact same thing on both. I really don't know if there's any big advantages for the software on the Series X right now, but there probably will be eventually down the line. I know a humongous aspect of the Xbox Series X the One X doesn't really have of the ability of playing 4K at 60 frames per second if your TV supports it, and that's a humongous asset for it. But again, it's only if your TV supports it. If your TV does not support it, then there's really not a huge advantage for it. And in the future, there could be support for 120 frames per second as long as your TV supports it, which is huge. And Microsoft has also said that in the future, 8K capability will also be there, which is going to be awesome. Now, you will have to have an 8K TV or a 4K at 120 frames. You kind of have to keep that in mind, but that's still humongous assets that you have. The One X is only, suitable for 4K, which is still extremely good for a majority of people. But that Series X is definitely going to be better when it comes down to that, and you're definitely going to be having more features for sure. Now, internally, the Xbox One X was an 8-core CPU, at 2.3 gigahertz. The Series X is 8 cores at 3.5 gigahertz. So you're definitely getting a more, speedier process. And as of right now, like I said, the One X is still extremely fast in my opinion, but the Series X is supposed to be faster. And I played a couple games on it. I've done a couple things here and there, and it does seem like it's a very smooth experience. But from the games that I play and for the settings that I use, typically like mid-tier graphics and everything, I don't really see a huge difference just yet. But that's the whole point. You're not going to see any differences right now. You're going to see them eventually a couple of years from now when the One X isn't really supported. There's not a lot more games for it anymore. And the Series X is, having that 8K capability and all those different things. That's when you're going to see, there's more of a future, I would say, for the Series X right now than the One X. And that's a humongous selling point for it. And really everything you're going to have on the Series X is going to be faster and a smoother experience than the One X. And Microsoft even said that the Series X is at least 8 times more powerful than the original Xbox One, and it could be up to 2 times more powerful than the Xbox One X. And that is humongous. So for the games that I play, it's not really going to be that big of a deal. But for the games that you play, if you're constantly, downloading a bunch of games and trying to play a bunch of games and all that stuff and do a bunch of stuff in the background, you're going to be having a better experience on the Series X than the One X. On top of that, the RAM has improved. So you're getting 4 gigabytes more of RAM on the Series X than the Xbox One X, which is huge. Do I notice that day by day? Probably not. If I use this console a little bit more, then maybe I would see it. But ultimately in the future, that's definitely going to be the case. And on top of that, you have an SSD natively built in on the Series X, where you only have that hard drive on the Xbox One X. And that is another humongous deal that you're getting with the Series X. That just makes it that much better of a deal. And like I said before, that is a humongous asset for it. You don't want to be outdated and have a hard drive on your Xbox One X. And you can always put an SSD in that if you want to by, external storage. But it comes natively built into the Series X, which is amazing. And that's another huge asset. And ultimately, the gaming library is going to be way more. And you're just going to have a plethora of games that you can play on the Series X as well, since that is backwards compatible with all the games that are, capable on the Xbox One series. So any game you can play on the Xbox One, even the backwards compatible ones, you will be able to play on the Xbox Series X as well. So it's kind of like a no-brainer as at this point, because it's like the Xbox Series X can do everything the One X can do, but not vice versa. So that's another huge asset. Now, I might as well go ahead and hit on the controllers on both. In my opinion, the biggest differentiating factor that I've seen between both is obviously that there's that share button, the dedicated share button on the Series X, which I think is cool. And on the back of the controller, the feeling of it, I think the texture based on the back of the Xbox Series X feels really good. I actually really do like that. And when I feel it in my hands and I'm messing around with it, it actually does feel pretty good, which is something I'm really happy about. But like I've said before, I've said this before and I'll say it again, these controllers just don't feel as premium to me. Even Sony's controllers, they don't feel that good. I feel like the original Xbox 360 controller felt extremely premium. These ones, I don't know, even the Xbox One S controller didn't feel extremely premium. So I will have to see with these PS5's controllers, see if those are better or more premium feeling or whatever. But with this console, I will tell you, for the most part, the controller is good, and I will say it's an improvement from the previous one. I will have to see the battery life and everything like that, and you do get USB Type-C, which is a huge asset for that console. Now with the Xbox One X controller, the micro USB port on the back, I'm totally okay with, you will have to buy that rechargeable battery if you want to just not even have it plugged in and not rely on AA batteries. But I think with this controller, it is a step up in the right direction, but I cannot wait until Microsoft actually puts in the rechargeable battery stock into the box without us having to buy it separately. So that really pretty much covers up everything on the controller, and that really pretty much covers up everything I wanted to hit on in this review. What I can tell you is that definitely when it comes down to both consoles, the Xbox Series X, like I stated before, is the better console day in and day out. It's going to be getting you a better experience, better gameplay, better everything, whichever way you look at it. But like I said before, if you're not playing super intensive games and you don't really need the latest and greatest right now, I think if you can wait out even just another year or two, I think you'll be perfectly fine. Like I said before, all the games that are coming out for the Xbox Series X for the most part are pretty much coming out for the Xbox One X, unless it's some crazy, only for the Series X type of game. I think the new Halo that's coming out or been postponed or whatever, I think that is an exclusive for this type of console. But again, if you don't need that, a lot of games are still through the Microsoft Store. They're still getting updates to the Microsoft Store, and I don't really think there's a huge reason to go for it. I will tell you though, the upgrade is pretty good. I will say for the most part, you're getting more RAM, you're getting an SSD, faster gameplay. I think more built-in storage out the box, a better design, better fan technology within it, maybe even a better controller, and it's really not crazy expensive coming from the Xbox One X, but like I stated before, if you have the money, go for it, but you're perfectly fine, I think, with an Xbox One X, or even if you want to buy an Xbox One X, I think it's still a pretty decent pickup for sure. So that really pretty much covers it up for the most part. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly, everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.